Hello and welcome to Tattva Conversations and Explorations. For our first episode on biology, we sat down with Dr. John Van Wyhe. Dr. John is a historian of science who specializes on Charles Darwin, Alfred Russel Wallace, and the history of evolution. He is the founder and director of Darwin Online and has published 15 books and lectures and broadcasts around the world. We discussed what it means that accident is the first building block of life. What makes something alive? The missing link. The great English naturalist Mr. Charles Darwin and his idea of what God might be. We hope this conversation can help the listeners see the Tattva, or the true essence of biology, and its potential to help us understand how life came to be and the various ways in which it evolves with and through humans, as well as all other living beings. Hello, Dr. John. Welcome to Tattva.
Hello.
So I'd like to start with the most basic question to get things started for us. What is biology?
Well, biology, quite simply, is the study of life, the study of living things.
So, is there anything else you'd like to add to it?
Well, like all sciences, it has changed over time. Mm-hmm. Whatever science you choose, chemistry or astronomy, the further back you go in time, the more different it is from today. So what they studied in past centuries, we might still recognize as biology, but it's not the same as practiced today. Today, it's become, of course, a very sophisticated natural science.
Sure. Yeah, I think we'll get into what that means a little later in our conversation. So I started to think about biology. I had it in school and that's about it, right? And after watching a couple of your videos that are available online and reading a couple of things and visiting your website, Darwin Online, I started to wonder if evolution is the central quest of biology. And if so, what was this central quest before evolution came about as a concept? And what is the central quest now? Yeah, that's basically the question.
Right. Well, it is difficult to boil down the activity of so many people in a large community around the world as being about one topic or question. There's lots and lots of questions that are investigated. But so with that in mind, I would say that before evolution was accepted, most naturalists, as they were called, were studying the structure of living things, analyzing how they worked, why they were shaped the way they were, and so on, and also classifying them. Mm-hmm. So it's because in earlier times, more and more species of plants and animals were constantly being found. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of work was about simply naming them and classifying them. Mm-hmm. Whereas nowadays, that's perhaps a secondary consideration. Mm-hmm. And the focus has turned more and more towards deeper molecular level explanations of how life works, how living things work. So originally it would have been on the level of the individual plant or animal. Nowadays, more of the focus is on the DNA, the genes, and how that actually works out at a very, very tiny level. So it's become very specialized. And that means it's more difficult for the average person to understand what it's all about. Whereas mm-hmm. in the past, everyone could understand a flower or a mm-hmm. squirrel. Mm-hmm. If that was the level of discussion or analysis. Mm-hmm. And nowadays, it's less about how does the squirrel carry a nut from one tree to another, mm-hmm. but more about how is it that the DNA of the squirrel has allowed it certain parts of its behavior to be passed on through generations or something like that. So the minutiae mm-hmm. is very complicated for a lay audience today.
Okay, right. So how I have divided my questions for you is like, I'd like to cover as much as we possibly can and as much as I've been able to, articulate myself through my questions. These are the categories. Something I'd like to cover a bit about evolution first, and then maybe go on to your experience as a historian and all of those things. So staying on the topic of evolution, for my next question, have you heard this phrase? I don't know how common or popular it is. Accident is the first building block of evolution. I heard it.
I haven't come across that one, I don't think, but I know what the writer of that is getting at. Yeah,
you'll find it interesting. I first heard it in a film, and the film did not have anything directly to do with biology, but with physics, Interstellar. So it was a part of a dialogue that one of the female leads was saying, and she says, yeah, accident is the first building block of evolution. And you can walk down a certain road. I know the meanings of all these words, and I can also kind of put them together, but I'd like to hear what you would have to say to what it would mean.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's actually coming from a movie. That's actually quite a good one, because I actually show film clips to my students where evolution is described in a completely inaccurate and ridiculous way. Evolution does this, and evolution solves these problems.
Which are some of the films that you use then to do that?
Oh gosh, there's one of the Superman movies. I think it's The Man of Steel. I think it's called Superman, The Man of Steel. Yes, and in it, Superman is fighting an alien from his planet, and she tells him that you have a sense of, I don't know, empathy or sympathy or something like that. But if there's one thing we know, she says, evolution always wins. And things like that. So if you hear a summary or a shorthand description of any science in a movie, be very skeptical.
Beware.
Because after all, it's a movie, and probably written by people who don't know any science. But anyway, getting back to the one you mentioned about, what was it, accidents?
Accident is the first building block of evolution.
Yes. Well, that's actually kind of accurate in the sense that the modern theory of evolution works like this, that living things, when they are born or grow, they all vary. They're all a little bit different. They're not all exactly the same. And that could be the result of a mutation, or it could simply be the result of sexual reproduction, where two individual animals or plants mix their genes and the result is different from the parents. You don't just get lots of clones. And so all those little differences, you can think of them as accidental in the sense that they are not designed or predestined to work out in the future. Whatever is going to be thrown at life, changes in the environment, for example. So you can see them as accidental from the perspective of being useful or not. In fact, most mutations turn out to be not useful. They're not lucky accidents. They're just accidents. And those things probably won't survive. But let's say the environment is changing. Let's say, for example, a region of the world is becoming drier and drier over the years. Now, the plants or the birds that live there cannot directly react and become more drought ready. All that can happen is that any of them that happen to be born that have some feature that works a bit better, survives a bit better in that dry environment, those will tend to survive. But that can only happen if such things accidentally arise, which they do all the time. Things are constantly being born that are a little bit different. And usually nothing happens as a result of that. But under some circumstances, these accidents will turn out to be useful. So here's a very striking example. You can take cave fish. There are many caves in the world with fish in them. And very often these fish have no eyes. They live in permanent darkness underground. They don't need eyes. But their ancestors came from the surface. They were normal fish with eyes. How did they lose their eyes? Because of these accidents. Fish are born, I mean, how many billions of fish are born out of eggs every day in the world? It's a staggering number. Some of those have a mutation, which means they're born without eyes. That occasionally happens all the time. Well, out in the normal world, in the sea or in a river, a fish without eyes is not going to do very well.
Sure.
But if that one of those is born in a cave, that will actually have a little advantage over its fellow fish that have eyes, because an eye is a very costly organ to grow and to maintain. It takes calories to support such organs, but underground they're no use. So a fish that's accidentally born without eyes does a little bit better than the others. So in that way, you can see accidents as a starting point for evolutionary change.
And in this case, having some utility in the case of the cave fish. Yeah. And so, but because when I hear the word accident, this is what it sounds like to me, something that should not have happened. And then that's the let's say the emotional baggage that the word carries for just a layperson. Right. And then when because we've also been doing these interviews with physicists and mathematicians and, with linguists also, there is something like mathematicians talk about the unreasonable effectiveness of math. Like, why is there anything at all? And then this accident bit kind of fits in that, just happened. So I was not able to reconcile with this word. That, and another thing that I'd like to first, if you could walk us down this, you've given us an understanding of what you mean, but maybe perhaps a little deeper about the use of this word on the part of a non-biologist, of a very clever, creative writer. This is Christopher Nolan's brother. So it's from that film. And then what I also want to understand is that we are, from what I have researched, it seems that there is the environment, and then there are the beings that live in the environment. And there is, I don't know if there is a separation, but there is certainly a mutual coexistence, where environment seems to have an upper hand, that we have to adapt to the environment. Things are changing now. I know that humans are having an impact on the environment, but when things began, we were constantly adapting. So does it mean to say that, what does it mean to say? And am I right in saying that once upon a time, earlier in the stages of the planet coming into being, the first organism, the first point of life coming into being, it had to adapt to where it was, not the other way around. So first accident, and then perhaps if we can walk down this road.
Yeah, well, of course, accident, the word accident, like most words, can carry any number of undertones. If you look at a country or a large busy city, such as you have very many busy cities in India, how many accidents happen every day? I mean, if you just think of road accidents or other accidents of something falling on people's head from a building or something, such things happen unintentionally, but nevertheless, if you count them up, they tend to occur quite regularly.
Yeah.
So that there are certain number of thousands of accidents every year, for example, right? So in that sense, they are not planned, they're not intentional, but they do happen a lot, and it's actually quite the normal course of events.
Right.
That accidents always happen, and it's the same in biology. That with the recombination of DNA from two parents, you not only get offspring that are different, but sometimes the mixing of the molecules doesn't work entirely accurately, and you get little changes, which you could call accidents. But there are a lot of them.
Right. So I understand from what you're saying. So one is in the human world, the word accidents, and how it might play out in real life, we like to avoid as many accidents as possible. So there is water, or there's a banana peel, try not to step on it. But still, these strange things happen, and nothing is without a consequence. There's all, whether an accident happens, doesn't happen, there's always a consequence. Accident seems to be like a coming in the way of a series of pleasant or expected consequences. But when it comes to accidents, as we are seeing, as it's being applied here in terms of evolution, it's the first building block. So
yes, what is meant by building block is that what Darwin called natural selection is the process whereby some things live and some things die, and their actual characteristics, the organism's characteristics, make a difference to whether it lives or dies, or how well it survives and reproduces in its environment. And these accidental changes or variations in each individual will make a difference to whether or not they live or die. In the human world, when we use the term accident, I suppose we also mean whether or not there is any blame or guilt. Is anyone responsible? Which, well, maybe someone is responsible for a car accident, for example. But some accidents really are not the result of human failure. For example, sometimes people are struck by lightning. That happens hundreds of times every year, perhaps thousands of times. It does happen a lot. Now, that's an accident. That's usually no one's fault, unless, of course, they're playing golf during a thunderstorm. But yes, so accidents are inevitable and they're very common. And in biology, there is no sense of intention or blame behind these, because there isn't any. These are just things that happen naturally.
Right. And it's like the other part of the second part of the question was the upper hand of the environment, at least in the beginning of all things. Am I right in saying that?
I would say that it was true then and it's true now, that living things have to adapt to a changing world. And that's always been the case. The world is not static. It has always been changing one way or the other. For example, the Earth has gone through many ice ages. They take millions of years, but they come and they go. That's a massive upheaval to the environments of the world and the things that live in them. Some things slowly adapt to the changing world and their descendants keep on living. Other things don't adapt quickly enough and they die out and go extinct. And that's still the case today, that the environment is primarily what living things have to adapt to. But of course, the environment in one sense doesn't just consist of the weather and the land and so on, but you can also see the environment as consisting of the other things that live there.
Yeah.
So from the perspective of any particular animal, its environment consists not only of the weather and the trees and the rocks and so on, but also all the other things that live in that place.
Sure.
That's all part of its environment. Yeah.
So when you think, when you talk about something being alive, what is it that we're talking about? Like, are you like fundamentally, what's the grassroots thing of what makes a thing alive? Is it movement? Is it growth? And how are those two different? Or is something still more fundamental than that?
Yes, there are a number of definitions what counts as something being alive, and some are better than others, but I don't think any of them are completely perfect. And there comes a point where you have to give up on quarreling about definitions because it becomes fruitless or not productive. I would say that the most basic thing that all living things have in common is that they are descended from something else that was alive. There is nothing anywhere that is alive that is not descended from parents. So life begets life. Life is a continuous process. So everything that we include under the term alive has that in common. Some people, for example, would say that viruses are not alive because they lack some of the characteristics that we would otherwise use in a definition of life.
Right.
They lack some of those things. They're unable to reproduce by themselves. They need a host cell to hijack, and then that allows them to do their thing. But are they alive? Well, they evolve. They have offspring.
What about water? What about rocks? Is it the right question to ask?
Well, I think one can ask any question, and the answer to those would be no. Water and rocks are not alive, in the sense that water doesn't make more water. It is a chemical phenomenon, and it can change state and so on. And the molecules in water can break up and become parts of other chemicals. But water doesn't give birth to new water.
Right.
Or the same for rocks.
I mean, if water splits, it's no longer water. Right?
If the molecule splits.
Molecules,
yes.
That's what I meant. Yeah.
Yeah. Then we would call it oxygen, hydrogen.
Correct.
Atoms.
But it's Dr. John, what's been happening is, see, we are non-experts. A lot of us are non-experts, and but there are a lot of these documentaries out there that we've been accessing, because people seem to generally have known, unknown, conscious, unconscious interest in these things, and a bit of ideas that physics is putting out. Are there too many universes? Bit of ideas that maths is putting out, bit of ideas that biology has been putting out. So I've seen these documentaries where they say that water has memory. So here we say, water has memory, and that they have done these experiments where you put water in two jars in two separate rooms, and in one, what you do is you say kind words to what you are interacting with water in a totally different way, like you would with another living being, with kindness, compassion, and saying nice words to it. And another room, another jar of water, it's the same water, just in two different jars. You're being violent, you're fighting with one another, and then it seems the water is taking on the properties. This is a part of a documentary that I've seen, and a lot of people have seen, and we've come to believe it to be so, that all the people that I've spoken to about this documentary have come to believe it to be so, without being themselves there when the experiment was taking place. It just appeals to us on I don't know, on a logical level, on something, I don't know on what level it appeals to us, but if it has memory and if it's taking on properties, but we're also calling it not alive. So how do we reconcile this?
Yes, well, I have heard of that sort of thing. I would say the water does not have memory in the normal use of the English word memory. And if it did, then those experiments could be repeated in laboratories all around the world, and it wouldn't be controversial or contested, which it is. Okay. So I wouldn't accept that one. The problem is, of course, that we live in a world in which there are programs, podcasts, articles, videos and documentaries that say millions of things, and some of them are not accurate. And how are we supposed to know, as someone who's not an expert? Now, you're referring to yourself or to your viewers as not being experts, but in a way, everyone is not an expert at most things. I'm an expert at a couple of things, but I'm not an expert on chemistry or football, for that matter. So I think the only advantage for me outside of my area of expertise is that I am familiar with how many things are said about my area of expertise that are wrong, that are unbelievably, incredibly wrong. I see it all the time. And I can only imagine that all the other areas of expertise about which I don't have probably have lots of mistakes in them too, but I can't see them because I'm not an expert in those things.
Right.
So I know how many there are in my area. So there's probably lots in every other area too. So what we as normal, curious people can do about that is, of course, we can't become experts at everything. No one can. But we can at least be prepared to know that that exists, that there's lots of things out there that are printed or broadcast that aren't correct. And we should always just be a bit skeptical.
And open-minded, right?
And acknowledge the fact that, well, I'm not an expert on this, and someone claims this or that, but that might not be true, because there's probably a large community of experts on that area, and I'm not one of them, so it's hard to know. So sometimes we have to reserve judgment on some things, unless something completely flies in the face of some area of expertise. Then I think we can be more than skeptical when we hear a claim. Well, for example, one thing that we should always ask is, who's saying this? What is the people who wrote this or who made this video? What is their expertise? What are their qualifications? Are they journalists? Are they scientists? Those are important questions that any of us can ask.
Yeah.
And that gets you, I think, many steps closer to being prepared not to accept things that aren't well accredited by the real experts, because there are some out there.
Sure.
Even if we don't know them.
Sure. I get what you're saying. In fact, we had one philosopher of mathematics, and his whole philosophy was based on doubt, and that things I think are, so far I've been able to see it this way, but it might not, it might just turn around and be totally different in a few years. And he said, yes, that's the thing from my experience and my time with that I've spent with philosophy, that I've been able, that insight I've been able to draw back into my life. And now it's not like I'm suspicious and I hold back. I don't hold myself back, I hold my judgment back. So for a lot of people, I've also noticed the sense of certainty gives security, and the sense of uncertainty gives insecurity. But what you're saying, and what perhaps he's also saying, to be a doubting Thomas in that sense, but how to be, and to still take solace from the fact that I don't know, it seems like nobody else knows either, and it's all right, life goes on. So it's it's like what we're talking right now is developing a philosophy of life which allows you to be, isn't it? And you don't get caught up in too many ideologies, and you don't get caught up in making sure you come to some conclusion, verified or not verified. But there must be something that I must hold on to. And perhaps that's what makes it difficult for us to give up on our beliefs, because that's where my certainty comes from. But what you're saying is keep an open mind, see who's giving you, who's the provider of this information, their credibilities, and that everything, that we have limitations as human beings in knowing who we are, what's around us. There are limitations, and there's practical value in accepting our limitations and still not being bogged down by it. Correct?
Yes, absolutely. Look, you will probably always be safer and more accurate if you say, I heard that people say that this exists, so this is true. Right? Now, if you say, I heard someone say it, or I saw a video that says it, what you're saying is completely accurate. That video says it, or that article says it, or that book says it. As opposed to saying, I heard this is true, which you're getting a bit more slippery.
Right.
So if you keep it at the level of someone has claimed this,
right,
then yeah. And also, there are things which no one, not even an expert, will know. And so sometimes we reach the limits or the borders of what we can know for certain.
Right.
And when we reach that point, it is very difficult, but we need to try to suspend judgment.
Right.
Say, well, actually, I'm not sure if it's this way or that way, because there's just not enough evidence right now to know one way or the other. It's hard for human beings to do that. It's not very satisfying.
Yeah.
But you will end up probably being safer and more accurate if you do.
Right. So yeah. Okay, now, I think we've reconciled some interesting points here about biology, and I think generally about life also. I think so. So coming back to our subject today. I want to understand from you, what is this deal about the missing link? What is its origin, the opposition it has faced, and places where it has found acceptance, and where does it currently stand?
Right. Well, the missing link is a phrase that people have been using for more than 150 years. Probably it became most popular after Darwin's Origin of Species was published, and then his other most controversial book, The Descent of Man, which discussed human beings being descended from other kinds of animals.
Okay.
And people who were very unhappy with this idea they claimed that there was a missing link between humans and any other creatures, that there wasn't an unbroken chain or set of links between, say, apes and humans. Mm-hmm. And it's a very catchy phrase, and it's never gone away. Mm-hmm. But if you talk to a biologist or a paleontologist who study fossils, well, they can explain to you that there's no such thing as a missing link. There isn't one. The fossil record for our family of animals, not just, beyond the primates, but actually the hominids, which is what we are, is very abundant now. We have a huge number of fossils showing that we used to be part of a large family of animals that walked on two legs. Okay. And we're not the only ones. We're just the only ones left, which, if you'll pardon the pun, we're the last man standing. Mm-hmm. But there used to be lots of these two-legged ape creatures. Mm-hmm. And some are more like us and some less so. Mm-hmm. But those were the most intelligent animals on Earth. That is before us. Right. So before we evolved, there was a family of animals. Mm-hmm. They were a type of ape. Mm-hmm. They walked on two legs. They had pretty big brains. They were very intelligent. They made tools. Mm-hmm. They could use fire if they found it naturally burning from lightning or something. Oh. So those brilliant animals walking on two legs, some of them gave rise to us. And we have an absolutely amazing fossil record for it. So when you hear people saying today that there's a missing link, they simply don't know what they're talking about, because there isn't. The fossil record is excellent. We don't have such a good fossil record for chimpanzees as we do for ourselves. Okay. Because chimpanzees live in African forests, and fossils don't really form there. I know. And as far as I know, we don't have any fossils of chimpanzees. Mm-hmm. 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 But nobody's talking about the missing link with chimpanzees. Sure. But there is one. Okay. Okay. So what I think that this begs a question. So we were talking about how our adaptation to the environment kind of ascertains whether a species goes on or not. Ideally, this is let's say sticking to our suspended judgment way of looking at things. This is the best we have, that a species continues because it adapts well to the environment. So these other hominids from whom we have descended, in what way did they not adapt to the environment, that they went missing completely, and that in what way did we adapt well to the environment that we're still here? Yes, that's a very good question. I think the first species of them that left Africa was called Homo erectus, which just means upright man, walking man, standing man. And they were a very successful species, and they spread all over the world. They made it up to northern China. They made it out to the islands of Indonesia. We still don't know how they got there, but and that was before we had even evolved. So they were very successful, very widely spread species. And then, of course, everyone's heard of Neanderthals, who were even more like us. They arose later. They were very, very similar to us. And they lived in Europe and the Middle East, and probably elsewhere, for perhaps 200,000 years, surviving ice ages and so on. So they were very well adapted. Right. What happened to them? Well, it's still being debated, but what is undeniable is that after we evolved, and some of us left Africa, We moved into the same places where the Neanderthals and the Homo erectus lived. And within a few thousand years, they were gone.
Gone is not the
So
same as hidden.
it means they weren't extinct.
Okay, because they're
So
all, yeah.
they were, so now this is something that happens all the time in the history of life. Something might be very well adapted to its environment, but if a new creature reaches their territory, it might exploit the environment better. It might outcompete them indirectly by being able to get the food better than they can. Or it might be a dangerous predator. So in the history of life on Earth, it's happened countless thousands of times that there was some island or a continent with lots and lots of creatures, with plant eaters and meat eaters, and then a new meat eater arrives from, I don't know, a land bridge forms, or who knows. And that new predator is just faster and more dangerous than the ones that everything was adapted to.
Right.
And it just kills loads of species really quickly before they can adapt. And human beings have been such a predator many, many times, that we arrived in places like Hawaii or New Zealand or Madagascar or the Americas. And we were a super predator, like lots of other super predators. And after we arrived, lots of things went extinct very quickly.
Including part of our own species.
Including probably the Neanderthals, yes.
Probably. Okay. Probably. Okay, so I think we can leave it at that, right? Have you seen this film called Man from Earth?
I have, yes.
Oh, that's so nice. There's so few people that I've met who've seen this film. It's a film that my husband and I, we watched like God only knows how many times. And it's a very good film because it has a psychologist, a top-notch psychologist, a top-notch biologist, top-notch Bible literalist, and all these people, and one curious student as well. And all of them come together and they're trying to understand this one creature, right, who seems to have lived for the last, a Cro-Magnon, who lives into our current age. You know the story. So I don't know if you remember this, but he says, yeah, actually, I have already asked you a part of this question, like our balance with the environment that determines if we will live or we will die. So anyway, coming back, one of the dialogues in the film was that they ask him, what do you think of the future of the race? You know, where are we headed? It seems like we're really going bonkers. He says, I've seen species come and go. It depends on their balance with the environment. A similar idea is also shared in the film The Lion King. So Mufasa says, everything you see exists together in a delicate balance. As king, you need to understand that balance and respect all the creatures, from the crawling ant to the leaping antelope. So I think we were talking a little bit about what is this balance, this harmony that all species of the planet need to have with the environment. Then if you could elaborate perhaps a little points that we maybe didn't touch about this, what is this delicate balance and what it is that we can take from, as human beings and apply it in real life in order to keep that balance, in order to keep our life and to keep the human life from going on as long and as much as it can. And also I want to understand, I have read about these certain bacteria, which are like millions of years old. So I don't know if any studies have been conducted and trying to understand what it is that they have done right, that they have seemed to have outlived all other species, that they're still here, despite being millions of years old.
Right. Well, okay, that's several questions there. On the topic of a harmony or a balance, Darwin would say that this is an illusion. Wow. That what looks like a harmonious balance out in nature is in fact a war raging of all against all. When we see the birds singing so sweetly in the trees, well, every minute of every day they are destroying life. They're eating seeds, they're eating insects, or whatever, or other birds or whatever. And so in a way, life on Earth gives the appearance of being in balance, but that's actually because the arms race is kind of equal, and the predators are not completely decimating the prey because they're able to reproduce enough to make up for the losses that are killed by the predators. The predators aren't doing that to help their prey. They would eat them all if they could, but it's difficult, and the prey are well camouflaged, or they can run away, or they're poisonous to eat, or whatever it is. So you get what it looks like a balance, because everything is trying to stay alive. But some things are trying to stay alive at the expense of eating other things. So I don't think it's easy to draw lessons from that to human life, how to live our lives. I think those are two very different kinds of thing. And I don't see an inspiration in that. So for example, a type of parasite that needs to feed on a human body or another animal body for part of its life cycle in order to then go on and grow and reproduce and then infect another human. Well, we don't like that. We don't really like that particular balance. But from the point of view of that parasite, everything is in a harmonious balance because there's enough animals or humans around to infect, to be a parasite on and grow for a while. So it depends on the perspective. And if we restrict what we see in the natural world enough that it looks like a harmony and a balance, then we are not seeing the whole picture, which we should do. We can do.
Okay.
So I don't think it's a good model for human life. Now, what was the next part of your question?
Yeah, I'll come to that. There's just one point I'd also like to make. You were talking about how if the predator could eat all the prey, it would. But then somewhere it's kind of encoded in the way life is that we have limitations in how much we can eat. So, right? So there is...
Well, some of us more than others.
But still, like if you don't compare one species with another, the fact that digestion itself, like after some point you cannot, even human beings, I can eat my heart out, you will stop somewhere. So this sense of limitation, a natural limitation on things, which probably helps us keep that balance. And it is when we get greedy as humans. I don't know if this greed exists in other species, because I don't know if there are bacteria that just don't stop eating. Till they drop off and die, till then they're eating. I don't know. And they still continue on. That's a strange thing, because I do find these ticks on my dogs, and they just keep growing and keep getting bloated. I don't know what's going on, but then they fall off. And then I see them walking on the walls, and then I don't see them anymore. So I don't know. But it seems like a cap has been set by whatever. Nature, evolution, or some laws that nobody can seem to get past without some dire consequences. Would you say that's a nice insight to then derive?
It's true if you talk about an individual thing. Right? There's only so much I can eat, or there's only so much a dog can eat. But when you talk about the species of dogs or wolves or hawks, they eat other animals, and it is possible to eat them all and they go extinct. This has happened many times.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's what I mean by they can eat them all.
You literally mean that. Okay.
It's happened millions of times in the history of life on Earth. Often what we see is that creatures that are killed by predators a lot, usually they have a lot of offspring. They lay a lot of eggs, or they grow lots of seeds, or whatever it is. And on balance, a few of them live. Oh, think, for example, of sea turtles. Everyone has seen footage of these cute little sea turtles emerging from the sand where their mothers laid the eggs, and they scurry down the beach. Well, all the birds and the land predators in that area, they see this, they know, and they come and they eat all they can. And they might kill most of them, but a few make it. And then, of course, a lot of them get eaten in the oceans as well. Before a few might grow up long enough to then be adults and come back and lay lots of eggs again. So there's no mechanism in nature whereby some predators could say, well, I'm really hungry, and then there's only one turtle left.
Right.
They will eat it if they see it. So the turtles are only surviving because they all emerge at once in a huge glut of numbers because they are probably good at hiding from predators. You know, they do their best not to get eaten, but the predators are doing their best to find them.
Right. So the second part of the question was that there are these bacteria that have been around for millions of years that have outlived all other species that came after them, and so is it then because that they don't have anybody who wants to eat them?
Yeah, there are some very striking examples of species that have barely changed for millions of years, but I'm sorry to say that they don't have any special characteristic or magical thing about them. Instead, what they tend to be is something that fits their environment quite well enough, and nothing has come along that does what they do in their environment better. So they just carry on. Now, if you imagine that there are billions of species in the world, let's go back, a few 100 million years ago.
Okay.
And there's billions of species alive. But over the millions of years, the world is constantly changing, and there's volcanoes and asteroids hit the earth and so on. Lots and lots of them go extinct, but a few of them keep going. That's, I think, not surprising. And so the fact that some of them are still going today, yeah, but those are very few. Out of all the species. So most of them survive for a while, some of them for a very long while. But eventually they usually go extinct. So those bacteria that you refer to, and some of the other species that have lived for a very, very long time, I'm sure they have predators who eat them, but probably just not enough to have ever killed them off.
Yeah.
So for example, there are some very primitive shellfish, whose name I forget at the moment, but we can find fossils of them, of creatures very like them. It's basically just like a little clam shell with a little worm coming out the bottom, and they would live in the mud at the bottom of the sea, and the little clamshell part was the feeding part, and that would stick out of the mud where it's dangerous. That's where the shell was, whereas the soft worm is in the mud, and they would just filter out particles in the water. Well, these things have been around for hundreds of millions of years, because being a worm in the mud that filters particles is good enough to survive in the oceans of the world that have lots of sediment on the bottom, lots of mud.
Right.
And nothing has evolved to do that better than they do. So they're still hanging on.
Right. And they're not experimenting. They're sticking with it.
Oh, that's a very good point. That's a very good point. I said at first that there's nothing special about them. And that means that their offspring will vary just as much as the offspring of all other species vary. That vary means that they'll differ in some little degree, in some direction or another, in different color, different size, different in their ability to digest particles, whatever it is. Everything about every living thing varies. But if one of these organisms is very suited to its environment, it's possible that any difference of varying in any direction is actually not good, and won't survive. And so basically they just get killed off.
Right.
Meaning that that species just carries on in its own little channel that works, and any little beginning to go in any other direction just gets chopped off. And so that species never changes into any particularly different looking form.
Right. Got it. So like I was telling you earlier, we've had conversations with people from the world of math, from the world of language, from the world of physics. And there seems to be, from what I've been able to understand, some bone of contention everywhere, which has got people divided them into groups. So in math, there are people who believe in the existence of, in the Platonic world, there are those who don't. In language, there are people who think that that language influences thought, and then there are those who don't. And in physics, it seems if I could be wrong, and in having understood what I'm saying, but it's the point being that there is a difference. Like in physics, people have different views on what consciousness is. So, and then there are people who are somewhere in the middle. who have reconciled with this seems to be it, this does not. So there are these kinds of ideas that have got people divided. In biology, is there anything like that that has divided the camp?
Yes, of course. If you going all the way back to the 1800s, when Darwin published his Origin of Species,
right.
Most people believe that God made all the different living things, or that God had made some kind of laws of nature that do that, that make living things. Well, Darwin's book, Darwin's theory, was arguing that living things simply change over time naturally. So the shorthand version of his theory is, where do the different kinds of species in the world come from? His answer is, they're descended from earlier ones. That is, they were not made from nothing like they are now. They're descended from ancestors who were pretty similar. And that's why they look the way they do. So the big divide in that would be either, can you believe in God and evolution? And that divide, I think, still exists today. So many people would write Charles Darwin when he was still alive and ask him this question: can you be a fervent believer in God and also accept evolution? And he always wrote the same thing back to them. He said, yes, of course. And he said, in fact, I think it's absurd to doubt that one can believe in both, because, and then he would list a number of very famous scientists who did believe in both, proving that it is possible to do so. But, as you suggested, there are people who will simply deny this and say, no, you cannot believe in both. You can only believe in one or the other. Some people say that.
Okay, that's interesting. So Darwin's idea of God, did he mean God as cannot be known, or as something that cannot be explained, or as the prime mover, or like, what was his definition of what is God?
Yeah, well, that changed over the course of his life. As a young person, he was brought up in the Church of England as a pretty normal Christian, not very religious, actually. And after his voyage on the Beagle and seeing the world and starting to ask himself very big questions, he began to doubt the truth of Christianity. He began to doubt the stories in the Bible and began to think that in order to believe these stories and these supernatural claims, one would need a whole lot of evidence to accept them. And so he gave up his belief in Christianity, but not of a God. So he gave up belief of the particular God described in the Bible and in Christianity and so on. But he never gave up belief that there was one, that there was a creator of this vast and complicated universe. He said once that, I find it impossible to imagine this vast and wonderful universe being the result simply of mere chance or accident. So I believe that there was some
purpose,
cause or beginning. But he would also insist that, as far as science and investigators have ever found, there has never been any break in the laws of nature that science has found and that science is studying. And so he believed he had found a new law of nature whereby species change to fit a changing world. So for his readers, most of his readers were religious. And within about 15 or 20 years, the scientific debate over evolution was over in his lifetime. It's quite an amazing thing that it happened so quickly and with such a skeptical audience. But it came to be accepted that evolution was simply a fact, even though most of those people were Christians. So how did they do that? They did that by thinking similarly to Darwin, that, well, God was so clever that he designed the laws of nature and of biology to work in such a way that when species are going extinct all the time and leaving these holes or gaps in nature, that new species can naturally arise from existing ones to fill those gaps, rather than God having to come down from the clouds and zap, 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 lots of species of new beetles and new snails into existence all the time to replace the ones that have gone extinct. So they carried on with their religion and just thought that, well, so science has found out how God made it work. See, that's how they kept both.
Yes.
Rather than thinking God individually makes the beetle and puts it there, but that he fashioned the laws of nature in such a way in the first place that that wouldn't be necessary, that they would simply form naturally.
So I've seen this film, Creation, Paul Bettany and
yes.
you know, his wife in real life, I forget her name, such a wonderful actress. And there, I know, because I've seen your videos and I'm itty-bitty familiar with your work. I know that the things that you might disagree with, you know, with Huxley being labeled this and, you know, why he delayed his work. And the film is based on a book called Annie's Box. His daughter, you know, is based on that thing. But in the end, after he finally writes the book and he gives it in his wife's hand and says, you burn it, do whatever with it, but read it once. And then she reads it. And in the end, she hands it over to him and says, may God forgive us. Something like that. So the faith still existed, but the book allowed her to make room for this new understanding to come in, to which she was afraid. Because of not having faith could lead to that. Fear kept her away from even reading and, you know, trying to understand what he was doing. But once she read it, she was able to make room for it in her own heart, in her own mind, and say, okay, yeah. So something akin to what you're saying.
Film, unfortunately, despite the subtitle of the film being "It's Creation: The True Story of Charles Darwin," that film is entirely fictional.
The untrue story.
All of the dialogue, it's not true at all. Emma Darwin didn't have any problem with his theory of evolution.
Wow.
Ever since they first got engaged, she knew about it. She wrote little comments on his early rough drafts. 20 years before he published the book, he wrote really long 230-page rough draft of the theory as he had worked it out so far. Well, we can see in the margins her comments about, oh, this part's not very clear, things like that. So she'd always known about it.
Right.
And that's what I was saying before about how religious people back then, it wasn't a complete game over to say that life evolves. Either you're religious or you accept evolution, one or the other. That simply was not the case, and it still doesn't have to be the case. So yeah, she was religious and he wasn't, but she knew all about his evolution theory. Yeah.
Sure. So as a historian, would you be able to draw for us certain strains of philosophies that over a period of time have driven biologists and have thus even taken biology forward? Some underlying philosophies that you probably find common among biologists. They might be at odds with each other, but yeah, they are there.
There are always, I suppose you might say, fashionable ideologies or leading ideas in every different era of science. And one of the things that a young scientist needs to do is to convince everyone else that they are pursuing the same goal, the acceptable goal, the orthodox goal. But sometimes people stumble on something that goes against what everyone has accepted so far. And that's tricky, because that can make you look like you're not playing with the team, like you're going against what everyone else has struggled to discover and establish. And usually it turns out to be a modification. We have to modify what we thought was completely figured out before. So for example, when genetics was being born as a science around the year 1900, 1910, and so on. The first of these geneticists argued that their genetics was a new science that would replace Darwinism. That new species don't arise from this process of natural selection, but arise through mutations, and that was their turf.
Okay.
Because they dealt with genes, and mutations happen to genes. And so you had two schools. You had the naturalists, the people who were out in the fields watching birds and mice or whatever. And then you had these people in laboratories in their white lab coats, studying things under microscopes.
Right.
And the two didn't see things in the same way.
Right.
But over a few decades of quarreling and so on, it turned out that actually they were sort of talking about the same thing, and that they mutually enforced each other's work, but it took a long time.
Sure.
And no doubt that sort of thing will happen again.
So while I was doing my research, I just typed on Google, what is evolution? Just the most basic question. And there are a couple of these tiny answers that came up. One of them said, the study of evolution of the human species can provide insight to understanding the violence, aggression, and fear around us today. What are your thoughts on this? Is it so? How is it so? And how can a regular everyday man benefit from this knowledge in a practical way?
Yes, well, first of all, and when talking about what evolution is or what it's all about, I would stress that it's not all about human beings, because there are billions and billions of species and we're just one of them.
Sure.
And this process of change happens with them all, with all of us. But if you just want to talk about humans, then yes, there is a lot to be learned about why we are the way we are based on where we come from, what we are descended from. We are descended, of course, from other humans like us who have been around in this world for 150, perhaps 200,000 years. So a human recorded history as we call it, is only about 7,000, 8,000 years old. And we've been around for 200,000.
Right.
So almost all of the existence of our species, we don't know anything about it, except for from paleontology, archaeology, and so on. The remains of our ancient ancestors, and by studying scientifically how we work and behave now. Because there are things about us that only make sense because our ancestors must have done that and it worked for them in those ancient, when they were all cavemen, for example, and we had to hunt and gather and so on. There were certain things in their societies, in their survival, that meant that people who deviated from that probably didn't survive. So they died, or they didn't leave offspring. We're descended from the ones who succeeded in surviving long enough to have children. So we have their characteristics. And some of those characteristics include some of the base differences between men and women. This is, of course, endlessly debated and will always be, but there are differences between men and women.
Sure.
I mean, in terms of behavior, not physically. And the best explanations we have as for why these exist are not just socialization and culture, because culture is extremely variable and changes dramatically over time. Whereas when you find that men and women do the same things in all societies, in all languages, and throughout all of human history, then you can't use culture or society as the explanation for why those things exist, because all the cultures and societies are different, radically different.
Right.
But there are some few basic things about men and women that are different that only make sense in terms of where we come from, and that our ancestors must have behaved like that, and it must have worked for them. But that's not a justification for why it's a good thing. That has nothing to do with it. It just means that it's just a way of explaining how did we get to be like this. But this is not any kind of guide for how we ought to be. That's a completely different topic.
Right. And if like it's species that have survived, right? Often in our language and for us, we end up saying it is the love for life. But from what you're saying, it is also a sense of resilience, right? That you don't want to die, so you survive. And that requires that requires resilience when you're constantly, maybe going hungry for days because there's a predator around that you cannot defeat. But once the scent of the predator goes away, you come out of your cave and you go hunting again. And that so something in us drives us to live, not even to want to live, like to just break it down to fundamentals. So there's resilience coded into, I don't know, in our DNA. So would you say that we're more resilient that way than we ought to sometimes think of ourselves? We do you think we think of ourselves as weak and currently, like, and we forget to see that our ancestors who were very much like us, culturally different, maybe traditionally different, maybe, spoke differently, lived differently, but fundamentally the same, that we too are resilient. And that's what keeps us going. And probably that is what gets translated to our love for life. And today we want to live because that the threat of predators is not as much as it used to be, or maybe the form of the predator is changed and we are yet to understand the threats we are under. So we are quite okay.
Yeah. So you can redescribe that same resilience as whatever it was in those ancient ancestors that made the difference between the ones who did persevere and stick it out long enough to survive, as opposed to some who may have given up in despair.
Do you think
such trials must have happened again and again and again, right? The evolution, what we call the evolutionary process, is sort of like a filter,
right?
In which some things get through the filter and a lot of things get stuck in the filter.
Right.
Things get stuck are dead.
Right.
They die. And so an organism like us who would not struggle, would not persevere, not be resilient, probably
will perish.
Wouldn't make it. Yeah. And so would not pass on the characteristics of not being perseverant to offspring, whereas the persevering, resilient ones probably would pass on those characteristics to their offspring.
Right. But you also said despair. I don't know enough to comment, but it feels like on some logical level, on some, I don't know what level, that despair, was it like 70,000 or older, 200,000 years that despair existed? I mean, if you get infection, if you get pneumonia or something, you die, right? You might have a child already.
Sometimes, of course, those are all complicated situations. You can get an infection and you can pull through.
You could, yes.
Or you could die.
Or you could die. So, okay. So that I understand being the cause of death, like a natural reason, slow and painful, whatever, or overcoming it. But despair in our ancestors, despair for what? Like, is it a despair that hunger leads to? Not having eaten for many days?
I can think of an example. Here's another film. You like film references.
Yeah.
There's a film called Unbroken.
Oh.
It's set in the Second World War.
Okay.
It's a true story.
Okay.
About some American a bomber crew whose plane crashes in the Pacific, and that's 3 men survive the crash, and they're in 2 little inflatable lifeboats, and they're in the middle of thousands of miles of ocean.
Right.
They've got basically almost nothing to survive. One of them despairs. He's constantly saying, "We're all going to die. We're all going to die. We're not going to make it." And the others say, "Shut up, shut up. We'll be fine. We'll be fine." And the one who was very negative and skeptical, he became more stressed and he died. He really died. And the other 2 managed to survive long enough that a ship found them. Yeah. So yeah, that's not a fictional story.
So both possibilities exist, essentially.
I think so.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, great, great. Would you have any comment to make about a world where evolution is accepted by all?
Well, you could ask me the same question. Would I have any comment about a world in which everyone accepted that the Earth is round?
Okay.
Does it really matter? Does it make any difference? I don't know. It's not my job to determine what everyone in the world thinks, but apart from a small number of people, the whole world, people all around the world suggest that the world is round. But accept this. It's not contested anymore in science, and it hasn't been for hundreds of years. We talked before about how science is always changing and some things are always liable to be overturned or replaced with new scientific knowledge. But I want to add a footnote that there are some things that will never be contested again. And the fact that the Earth is a globe will never be contested. That's done. We're never going to have to deal with that again. And evolution is another. Living things have and do change. That's done. We know this with enough evidence that you could stack the papers to the moon. In fact, we know it more precisely than we know that the Earth is round. We have more evidence for evolution than the roundness of the Earth.
Wow.
Which might sound surprising, but it's true.
Yeah.
So that will never be contested again, whether or not it happens. How it works will, of course, continue to be debated, and more will be learned about the details of how that happens.
Right.
But the broad face fact of it, no. So what's going to happen in the future about the acceptance of that, I don't know. When it comes to evolution, almost the only thing people actually care about who reject this or who have a problem with it is human beings.
Yeah.
No one really has a problem with bacteria evolving or viruses like the coronavirus. Every time you hear about a new variant, another word for that is it has evolved. That is the correct language.
Right.
The virus is evolving, like everything else evolves.
Yeah.
But when you talk about humans evolving, well, that bothers a lot of people, and it always has, and I suppose it always will. The only message of hope I can offer on this point is that it doesn't need to be so unhappy and contentious, because plenty of people, plenty of religious people, have no problem with evolution at all and carry on with their religious identities and lives.
So are we saying that the people who have a problem with human beings evolving, are they having a problem with the fact that it seems like we're the best we can get, so there is no need? Or are we saying that what are we saying? Like, what are we afraid of? With technology coming in, all this symbiosis is already happening. Evolution is happening in some sense right in front of our eyes, isn't it?
Yep. No, I think what people object to mostly is the idea that human beings were not made by God exactly as we are now from nothing. They went from being no humans to, boom, God made them. And many religious traditions say this. And some people take it literally, and some people take it metaphorically. But as far as science is concerned, we know where humans come from.
And we're not the end of...
We come from other primates, and evolution never stops. It's just going to keep going forever. There's no end. There's no peak. There's no perfection. There's just surviving well enough. Thank you very much for right now.
So, okay. So it's like we've established three certainties. The Earth is round for sure. Evolution happened for sure. And that will continue for sure.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. And they say that you're a historian of biology, right? A historian. Now, I think it's a personal question now. Yeah, that's the third category I wanted to get into. That what made you choose to be a historian of biology and not of any other sciences? What pulled you towards it?
Right. I think in my particular case, it's a combination of my personal interests. I very interested in nature and living things. So as a hobby, I like to watch and study wildlife. And so I also had always studied history. And so, yeah, studying the history of people studying nature was inherently interesting for me.
Okay, great. And obviously you've heard this, so that history repeats itself. And I think this is what you probably meant, that evolution will go on, if evolution is the history of the species, or maybe one of the histories, who knows. But
Yes.
what are your thoughts on what does that mean to you, that history repeats itself? Both pros and cons.
Well, when we say history repeats itself, people mean that you see what looks like the same thing happening over and over again. For example, when a very popular prime minister of a country, it has a certain term, but then at the end of it, there's some sort of scandals and the person topples from favor, and then there's a new one, right? This has happened over and over again, hundreds of times, all around the world. So in that sense, you could say, oh, that's history repeating itself. But at the same time, every case is actually unique. But still, it is quite interesting, isn't it, that different cases at different times, at different countries, can be so remarkably similar. And that's what people mean when they say history is repeating itself.
Right. Okay, just last two questions, Dr. John. Like, how has your work and your study influenced you personally, and maybe even your worldview as an individual?
I suppose it's given me an appreciation of how small we are in the world and indeed the universe. Because normally we only hear about ourselves, or perhaps big interesting animals like elephants or cats or whales or dolphins. But really, life on Earth has always been mostly microbes and not the big things we are familiar with. That's actually a tiny minority of the life on Earth. So life on Earth has always been planet of the microbes, and it always will be. When you realize that we are not what you always hear, that we're somehow the peak of evolution or the most perfect creature or something like that, that we're just one of many, many different kinds of living things on this, and we're all together on this one planet. In a way, it's a humbling perspective that we are very, very small, even though we can do lots of amazing things. True, but ultimately, we are one of very many, and we are not as in control as we sometimes think. Well, look what happened with the pandemic.
Sure.
One of the most humble living things you can imagine, a virus, which some people say isn't even alive, it's so simple, so basic, suddenly evolved a little differently than it had been before, and it found a new environment, and it was very successful from its perspective.
Right.
And yeah, how did it humble us?
It's the same how some physicists, some philosophers of physics seem to see it. Like, ours is not the only planet. We're not the center of the universe. And for them, that is a humbling experience. Well, what do you mean by humility? What is humility then? Then what does it still mean? Okay, we're not the best. Okay, we're not the strongest. Okay, we're not the only ones. So what does it mean to you personally?
I think it means holding some sense of reserve and not thinking of ourselves as the point of nature or of existence. We're not. There is no point. Nothing is the point of nature and existence. Biology doesn't have any goals. Evolution doesn't have any goals. And it's not about progress. It doesn't progress. It's just change. And so that really topples a lot of our traditional arrogance about ourselves being the best at everything. Human beings are sometimes a bit arrogant. We just love to think of ourselves as the best. And well, yes, okay, we are great. We do all sorts of wonderful things. But this humbleness or humility I refer to is a way of keeping things in proper perspective,
right?
Considering what we actually know about life on Earth, which is that we are a small piece.
Right. Like some people, when they see this, that we're not the center of the universe, we're just a small dot, and we're not the, the governing species, they topple the other way. We're nothing. So they just go totally the other way. So if we are not everything, that means we're nothing. So, and then I don't know, because I've known people like this personally. I've had their representations on television as characters, oh, you're nothing. What were you? Just a dot. So it also can go the other way. But you're saying if you keep perspective, so you're somewhere in the middle, right?
Yes, I think that's a healthy way of looking at it.
Okay. There's something I'd like to go back to. When you were talking about the film Unbroken, right? And this is the one who despaired, died. The one who held on to the possibility of surviving this truth actually did survive. So now what does this say about us? Like when things get really difficult, there is something else that helps us, keep life. Is it our will? Is it that resilience that we were talking about earlier? Is it this, blind hope? Or this, what do you think in this film, if you could use it as a reference, that what really helped him and what really did not go in the favor of the guy who died? Is there a biological, or is it a question of psychology then? I don't know. What does it become a question of?
I don't think it's possible to exclude any of those factors. After all, that's the story as told by the survivor. If we were actually there and could observe, well, maybe he was not as skinny as the one who didn't survive. And that's why, I don't know. There's probably lots and lots of factors involved. But one thing we do know is that people who are feeling more positive, who are less stressed, they tend to be healthier. Their immune system tends to be more robust. Yeah, we know these things. And being overly negative or pessimistic, can make you a bit less healthy. Can make you less able to ward off infections and so on. And also just psychologically, of course, people can suffer from depression, from loneliness, from isolation, from persecution. And these things all make people literally, physically suffer and do less well. So no, there's no silver bullet solution to any of these things, but we can at least try to understand how humans work and why we sometimes flourish and other times we don't flourish so much.
Right. My last question is, do you have a favorite quote by Darwin, and what about it do you value, if you have any?
Oh gosh, I have several favorites, but I'll share one with you, which is that he said, it is those that know little and not those who know much who say that this or that problem will never be solved by science. In other words, it's the people who are ignorant who make the big claim that science will never solve this. And the people who know a lot don't say that. This is something he had observed time and time again. People who don't know very much will make big claim, oh, science will never figure that out. He was saying,
You don't know much.
Wait and see, wait and see. Okay. Yes.
Yeah, so like knowledge, his focus was on knowledge, acquiring knowledge, not staying ignorant, right?
I think what he was saying is that people who had worked really hard to learn a lot,
right,
had also learned to be a bit skeptical, and it also learned that in the past, a lot of things were not known and thought impossible, and over again, they were discovered. Whereas the ignorant person wouldn't know that and could very confidently assert that will never be solved or that will never be figured out.
Right.
That's what he meant.
Very interesting. With that, we can conclude our conversation, Dr. John. This was so fun and so many things to pick up from it. And I really thank you for your time. And despite these little issues we had with the internet, thank you for being so cordial and so generous with your insights. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Speaking with Dr. John helped me understand that evolution might not have a goal after all, most likely because it's been happening forever, and also because it will always go on. I also understood that we are both a significant and an insignificant part of this eternity of movement, and defining which is which might be a worthy and fruitful pursuit. I found a similar idea echoed in one of the lines in the book I'm currently reading, Roots by Alex Haley, where the protagonist, who's on the verge of completing his manhood training, found himself feeling very small, yet very large at the same time, and concluded that that's what it must mean to be a man, or more generally speaking, to be a human being. It will be wonderful to know your thoughts on the conversation, and if it inspired your worldview in any way. Thanks for being here. I will see you soon with another interesting mind, demystifying another interesting subject. Until then, take care.